Hi there, and welcome back to this playlist, or welcome to this playlist if you're just joining on psychometric tests. In this section of the playlist, we'll be looking at situational judgment tests in a little bit more detail. We'll be looking at what they are, how to tackle them, how to prepare, the things that you need to think about before you're going to one of these tests. Now, situational judgment tests can take different forms. Most often they're written scenarios, but it could be a video clip, and we're even seeing virtual reality being introduced. But essentially what it will do, it will give you a scenario, usually work-based, whatever form that takes, and it will be trying to assess your natural response, whatever your reaction would be to that scenario. We're going to take a look at written scenarios in this section of the playlist, but everything we talk about can be applied to whatever form it takes, whether it's video clips or virtual reality. In the test itself, you'll be presented with something like this. This is an example from the civil service recruitment process, their situational judgment test. And you can see at the top, you've got the actual scenario, what's work-based. It's quite vague. They'll give you some overall detail, but they won't give you excruciating detail. This happened and this happened, just an overall sense of what's going on. And then you'll have multiple choice responses, and in this scenario they're asking you what you are most likely to do and what you are least likely to do. So it's really important, as with all tests, read the actual question, read the answers, take a little bit of time to consider. You will be timed in these tests, but it's okay for some reflection, and then think about what you're most likely to do and then what you're least likely to do and answer accordingly. Now, they will be looking at this concerning their own individual framework, whatever job that is. In this case, it's the civil service, and the civil service have a handy cheat sheet for these sorts of things. This is the civil service competency framework. This is completely accessible on their website, and you can see this is what they will be testing with this situational judgment test. So they will be expecting and hoping that when you are ticking those most likely and least likely to do, that your most likely will align with this competency framework, which should suggest what you need to be doing to prepare for these sorts of tests. You need to be looking at their framework, whatever it is, whether it's behavioural competency. If they don't have something like that, then think about their overall mission statement, their culture that they'll have talked about on their website. The research that you put into this before doing the situational judgment test is really important, because it will give you an indication of how to answer these questions. You then apply that research that you've done in order to answer these questions effectively. It does require a little bit of work from you. It takes a little bit of preparation and practice, like I keep saying. But once you've done that, that's the way to get over a situational judgment test, but also any other psychometric test. Now, like I said at the start of this playlist, these sort of tests are becoming more and more common, and they are changing all the time. And while those online tests, the text-based scenario ones, are the ones we're seeing more commonly, we're also seeing video scenarios, virtual reality scenarios. We're starting to see visual data being presented, multiple views of a 3D space as an example. So you need to be aware and prepared for all these sorts of things. But fundamentally, it is going to come down to the preparation you've done, the kind of organisation you're applying to, and your understanding of that organisation, what the job involves, what you would be presented with, which leads me on to the really important part, how you are going to prepare for these tests. And the best ways to prepare, they sound simple, and in some ways they are, but first you are really going to have to understand what the day-to-day job involves, so that you can prepare accordingly, you can answer accordingly. You also need to understand the organisation, their values, and how that relates to the job. In the civil services case, we saw the competency framework. The organisation may well have something like that. If not, then you're going to have to think about their website, what they say on there, maybe even speak to people who work at that organisation already. These are all really important and will help you a lot. You also need to think quite carefully about your own values and the way you like to work. If you're coming up against a test and the answers that you're giving are the complete opposite to what an organisation is expecting, either you have to change your behaviour, or you really have to think, is this somewhere I actually want to work? right? And fundamentally as well, the really important thing is practice. The only way to get better at these sorts of tests is practice. I will cover how you do that more specifically in the final video of this playlist, but you'll also find a QR code to what we call Graduates First, which is a way to get free practice time for these different sorts of tests. But like I say, we'll cover that in some detail in the last video of this playlist. That brings us to the end of this section. As usual, if you could like and subscribe, we'd really appreciate that, just to grow the channel and help us reach more students and graduates. In the next section of the playlist, we'll be looking at games-based assessments, a different, newer type of psychometric test that we'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into.